It feels like we're more connected than Eve, and somehow more divided than ever. We can reach someone across the world in seconds. We can send a message instantly. We can scroll through hundreds of lives before we even get out of bed. We can see what people are eating, where they're traveling, who they're with, what they believe, what they support, what they hate, what they fear. But somewhere in all of this connection, something human has started to disappear. People are talking, but not really listening. People are surrounded by noise, but still feel alone. People are posting smiles, while silently breaking down behind the screen. And the strange part is that many people feel it. They just don't know how to say it. Because loneliness today doesn't always look like isolation. Sometimes loneliness looks like a full contact list, but nobody to call when your heart feels heavy. Sometimes it looks like 1,000 followers, but no one truly knows you. Sometimes it looks like laughing at work, then sitting in your car afterward with no energy left to pretend. This episode is not about blaming technology. It's not about blaming one generation. It's not about saying the world was perfect before. It wasn't. But something has changed. Something has shifted in the way we see each other, the way we speak to each other, the way we treat each other, the way we carry pain. In the way we forget that every person we pass, every person we argue with, every person we judge is still human. This is the human backbone. Have you noticed nobody really talks anymore? Have you noticed that people don't really talk anymore? Not the way they used to. Not the deep kind of talking. Not the kind where two people sit down and actually give each other time. Not the kind where someone says, "How are you?" and actually wants the real answer. Now, conversations move fast. Everything feels rushed. People speak in clips. Texts, comments, reactions, emojis, short replies, seen messages, unanswered calls. People say "I'm good" so quickly that it almost sounds automatic. But many times, they are not good. They are tired. They are stressed. They are overwhelmed. They are carrying things they never fully explain. They are trying to keep moving, because the world rarely gives people permission to fall apart. And because everyone else looks like they're doing fine, they stay quiet. That is one of the quietest problems in modern life. People are suffering in public, but silently. You see someone at the grocery store, at work, at school, on the road, online, and you think you know them because you see the outside. But you don't know the argument they had that morning. You don't know the bill they can't pay. You don't know the relationship they're losing. You don't know the parent they miss. You don't know the dream they gave up on. You don't know the pressure they feel to act strong. You don't know what they had to survive just to make it through the day. And they don't know that about you either. So we walk past each other like strangers, even when we are all carrying pain. That is how disconnection begins. Not always with hate. Sometimes it begins with distance, with people becoming too tired to care, too busy to listen, too distracted to notice, too guarded to open up, and too afraid to be honest. Because honesty feels risky now. If you say you're struggling, someone might judge you. If you say you're lonely, someone might think you're weak. If you say you're scared, someone might use it against you. So people hide. They hide behind work, behind humor, behind confidence, behind anger, behind scrolling, behind "I'm fine." But deep down, many people are waiting for somebody to notice. Not to fix everything, not give a perfect speech. Just notice. Just say "I see you, I hear you, you're not crazy for feeling this, you're not alone." That kind of human connection is becoming rare. And when something rare disappears slowly, people don't always realize what they're losing until it's almost gone. The illusion of connection we live in a time where connection is everywhere, at least on the surface. You can open your phone and instantly see people. You can watch someone's life through videos. You can comment, like, share, react, message, follow, subscribe. You can be connected to more people than any generation before you. But being connected is not the same as being close. That is the illusion. The modern world gives us constant access to people, but not always real intimacy with people. We confuse visibility with relationship. We confuse attention with love. We confuse followers with friendship. We confuse reactions with support. And slowly we start living in a world where people are always available, but emotionally unavailable. A person can post every day and still feel invisible. A person can be popular online and still feel unknown. A person can receive hundreds of birthday messages and still wonder who would actually show up in a crisis. That is the difference between digital connection and human connection. Digital connection says, I saw your post. Human connection says, I noticed you haven't been yourself lately. Digital connection says, I liked your picture. Human connection says, I wanted to check on you. Digital connection says, we interact. Human connection says, we matter to each other. And that difference is huge. Because humans were not built to be watched from a distance. We were built to be known. We were built to sit across from each other, to hear tone, to read eyes, to feel presence, to understand silence, to share space, to belong somewhere. But now, many people are surrounded by digital noise and starving for emotional presence. That is why someone can spend hours online and still go to sleep feeling empty. Because scrolling gives stimulation, but not always a connection. It gives a distraction, but not always comfort. It gives information, but not always wisdom. It gives contact, but not always care. And when people keep reaching for connection in places that only give them stimulation, they end up more exhausted than before. Because the need is real, but the substitute is weak. It's like being thirsty and drinking salt water. For a second, it feels like you're doing something, but the emptiness comes back stronger. Why loneliness is exploding loneliness is not just being physically alone. Some people are alone and feel peaceful. Some people live by themselves and feel strong. Some people enjoy quiet. That is not the problem. The problem is emotional loneliness. The feeling that nobody truly knows what you're going through. The feeling that you have to carry everything by yourself. The feeling that even when you are surrounded by people, you are still unseen. And that kind of loneliness is everywhere now. You can see it in young people trying to figure out who they are while being judged online. You can see it in adults working long hours just to survive. You can see it in parents who are tired but feel guilty for saying they're tired. You can see it in men who were taught to stay silent. You can see it in women who are expected to hold everything together. You can see it in older people who feel forgotten. You can see it in people who smile all day but cry in private. The world has become louder, but not always warmer. Faster, but not always kinder. More connected, but not always more caring. And loneliness grows in places where people don't feel safe being real. When people feel like they always have to perform, they stop revealing themselves. When they stop revealing themselves, they stop being known. When they stop being known, they start feeling alone. That is the cycle. And it's dangerous. Because when people feel unseen for too long, they can start believing they don't matter. They can start believing nobody would notice if they disappeared emotionally. They can start believing their pain is a burden. And when a society reaches that point, we don't just have a loneliness problem. We have a humanity problem. Because human beings need each other. Not in a weak way, in a natural way. A person can be independent and still need connection. A person can be strong and still need support. A person can be successful and still feel empty. A person can be surrounded and still feel alone. We have to stop pretending that needing people is a weakness. It's not. It's part of being human. The strongest people are not the ones who never need anyone. The strongest people are the ones who know how to build real bonds, how to tell the truth, how to care without embarrassment, and how to let themselves be cared for. Social media versus real human connection. Social media is not evil. That's too simple. Social media can help people find community. It can help families stay in touch. It can help small creators build something from nothing. It can help people learn, organize, express themselves, and feel less alone. But social media also changes the way we see each other, and we need to be honest about that. Online, people become profiles, avatars, opinions, posts, screenshots, targets, instead of full human beings. It becomes easy to forget that behind every comment is a person. Behind every argument is a person. Behind every mistake is a person. Behind every opinion is a person shaped by a life we may know nothing about. And when people forget, that cruelty becomes easier. Mocking becomes easier. Public shame becomes easier. Dehumanizing becomes easier. Because you're not looking someone in the eyes. You're looking at a screen. And screens can create distance from consequences. A person might say something online that they would never say face to face. They might attack someone they have never tried to understand. They might reduce a human being to one sentence, one mistake, one belief, one moment. But real life is not that simple. People are complicated. Grow, fail, misunderstand, carry history, carry fear, carry pain. And if we lose the ability to see complexity in each other, we lose the ability to have compassion. Social media also trains people to constantly compare. You compare your normal day to someone else's best moments. You compare your private struggle to someone else's public image. You compare your unfinished life to someone else's highlight reel. And even when you know it's not fully real, it still affects you. Because your brain sees the image before it remembers the context. You see the success, the body, house, vacation, relationship, smile, and confidence. And somewhere inside, a voice says, "You're behind. You're not enough. Everyone else is doing better." But that is not the truth. That is a distorted mirror. And many people are living inside that mirror every day, trying to look happy, trying to look successful, trying to look unbothered, trying to look healed, trying to look like they have it all together, even when they don't. So the world becomes a performance, and performance is exhausting. Because when everyone is performing, nobody knows who is really hurting. And when nobody knows who is hurting, nobody knows who needs help. Why people feel emotionally exhausted? A lot of people are tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. They are not just physically tired. They are emotionally tired, mentally tired, and spiritually tired. Tired from pretending, tired from worrying, tired from trying to keep up, tired from bad news, tired from bills, tired from conflict, tired from division, tired from feeling like everything is always urgent, tired from being reachable all the time, tired from never fully resting. Modern life gives people constant pressure. Pressure to succeed. Pressure to look good. Pressure to respond quickly. Pressure to be productive. Pressure to stay informed. Pressure to have an opinion. Pressure to be perfect. Pressure to be strong. Pressure to keep going even when they are falling apart. And because the pressure is everywhere, people normalize it. They say, "That's just life. Everybody is stressed. It is what it is." But just because something is common doesn't mean it's healthy. A lot of people are not living. They are surviving. They wake up tired. They work tired. They drive tired. They eat distracted. They scroll until their brain goes numb. They sleep without feeling rested. Then they do it again. And somewhere in that cycle, they stop checking in with themselves. They stop asking, What do I need? What am I feeling? What am I avoiding? Who do I miss? What kind of life am I building? What kind of person am I becoming? Because those questions are heavy, and when you're already exhausted, it feels easier to stay distracted. But distraction doesn't heal pain. It only delays the moment when the pain asks to be heard. And eventually, people break down. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes publicly. Sometimes through anger, through numbness, through withdrawal, through depression, through losing interest in everything they used to care about. And when that happens, the world often asks, what happened to them? But the better question is, how long were they carrying this alone? That question changes everything. Because it reminds us that people don't usually fall apart in one moment. They collapse under the weight that has been building for a long time. Weight nobody saw. Weight nobody asked about. They were too ashamed to explain. That is why care matters. Not dramatic care. Not perfect care. Simple care. Checking in. Listening. Being patient. Being present. Letting people be honest. That kind of care can interrupt emotional collapse before it becomes a disaster. The hidden grief nobody talks about there is a kind of grief people don't always recognize. It's not always the grief of death. It can be the grief of change. The grief of losing who you used to be. The grief of losing a friendship without a fight. The grief of missing a version of your family that no longer exists. The grief of watching people become strangers. The grief of growing apart. The grief of realizing your childhood is gone. The grief of dreams that didn't happen. The grief of time passing. The grief of seeing the world become harder than you expected. Many people carry this kind of grief silently because it's hard to explain. Nobody died, but something ended. Nobody left officially, but something changed. Nobody said goodbye, but the closeness disappeared. And that hurts. It hurts when someone you used to talk to every day becomes someone you barely know. It hurts when a place that once felt like home no longer feels safe. It hurts when family members sit in the same room but feel emotionally miles apart. It hurts when friendships fade because life gets busy. It hurts when you realize people you love are also tired, guarded, and distant. And sometimes the hardest part is that nobody talks about it. People just move on. They say, that's life. People change. Things happen. And yes, that's true. But it still hurts. We need to make room for that truth. Because people are not machines. We don't just update and continue. We feel loss. We feel distance. We feel endings. Even the quiet ones. And if we never name that grief, it turns into bitterness. It turns into numbness. It turns into anger. It turns into isolation. It turns into the belief that caring too much is dangerous. So people protect themselves by caring less. They say, I don't need anybody. I'm better off alone. People always disappoint you. I don't trust anyone. And sometimes those words come from real pain. But pain should not become a permanent identity. The fact that people hurt you does not mean you were wrong to care. It means you need wisdom, boundaries, healing, better people, better spaces, but not a cold heart. A cold heart may protect you from pain, but it also blocks love. And a life without love is not strength, it is survival with walls. What happens if we forget how to care? What happens if people keep becoming more divided, more distracted, more suspicious, more exhausted, more emotionally alone? What happens if we keep treating each other like opinions instead of people? What happens if we keep choosing winning over understanding? What happens if we keep laughing at pain because it's easier than feeling it? What happens if we keep scrolling past suffering until nothing moves us anymore? The danger is not just that society becomes angry. The danger is that society becomes numb. And numbness is dangerous because it makes cruelty feel normal. It makes neglect feel normal. It makes loneliness feel normal. It makes people disappear emotionally while still living right in front of us. That is not the world we should accept. We need to remember something simple. Human beings are not meant to be disposable. Not because they agree with us. Not because they look like us. Not because they vote like us. Not because they live like us. Not because they understand us perfectly. But because they are human. That should still mean something. Being human should mean we can disagree without destroying each other. It should mean we can be different without becoming enemies. It should mean we can be hurt without becoming hateful. It should mean we can be strong without becoming cold. It should mean we can care even when the world makes caring feel weak. Because caring is not a weakness. Caring is the backbone. It takes backbone to stay kind in a cruel environment. It takes backbone to listen when everyone wants to argue. It takes backbone to admit pain. It takes backbone to forgive without being foolish. It takes backbone to build connections in a world addicted to division. That is what the human backbone is about. Not pretending everything is fine. Not ignoring reality. Not forcing positivity. But asking a serious question. How do we stay human when everything around us is teaching us to disconnect? Maybe the first step is simple. Maybe it starts with noticing. Noticing when someone gets quiet. Noticing when your friend stops reaching out. Noticing when your family feels distant. Noticing when you've been scrolling instead of living. Noticing when your own heart has become tired. Maybe it starts with one honest conversation. One real check-in. One apology. One call. One moment of patience. One decision not to attack. One decision to listen. One decision to care. Because we don't fix the disconnection with more noise. We fix it with presence. We fix it with courage. We fix it by remembering that behind every face there is a story. Behind every story there is pain. Behind every pain there is a human being who wants to matter. And maybe that is what we are all looking for. Not perfection. Not fame. Not endless attention. Just to know that somewhere to someone we matter. So before we ask what's wrong with the world, maybe we should ask, who around me feels unseen? Who have I stopped checking on? Where have I become cold? Where have I confused being busy with being disconnected? And what would happen if I chose to care again? Because if we forget how to care, we don't just lose each other. We lose ourselves. This is the human backbone. Next episode, we're going deeper into the one thing almost everyone feels, but almost nobody admits: the loneliness behind the smile.